Greetings. So a while back, TEOTW Ministries put up this video. It's a video titled The Real Northern Kingdom. And in the video description, they wrote the following, quote, "Everyone knows that the Native American Indians and the Latinos are not Israel unless they're of Afro descent. Here's the real northern tribe of Israel," end quote. Now, that sort of video is intended as a jab at the One West Tribes chart, which I'm fully in favor of criticizing. You see, within the diverse Israelite spectrum, many have recognized that there are problems with that One West Tribes chart. However, unfortunately, some who have recognized those problems, some who reject the One West Tribes chart, have then made this unjustified leap to making sweeping statements and generalizations about hundreds of millions of people, and they wind up perhaps rejecting more than they should. And as was covered in a previous video, the TEOTW twins also have previously shared crude memes which make clumsy generalizations about what they call quote-unquote conquistador Asian Mexicans and quote-unquote Spaniard Latin Hispanics. Again, this was done as part of a jab at the One West Tribes chart. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Gedalia from H.O.W Music, or How Music, who can be found on the YouTube channel How Music TV. And I'll share some links in the video description. And I shared this picture of him with his permission. You see, I wrote to him asking if I could make a very brief video about him, and he gave me permission to share all of the screenshots that I'll be sharing in this video. Now, on an interesting note, it's my understanding that this gentleman is actually seriously thinking of making a documentary titled Hebrews to Latinos, which will sort of be like a play on the title of Ron Dalton's Hebrew to Negroes documentary series. And maybe some might find that idea absurd, right? Maybe the TEOTW twins might be among those who find that absurd. But the question I would ask is why, right? On what grounds? And this naturally takes us back to the questions which should be at the center of any discussion along these lines. What definition of Israelite are we working with, and what methodologies are employed for trying to determine which modern individuals fit with that definition? And with that in mind, let's discuss the DNA of Gedalia from How Music. Because the TEOTW twins have tried to shift to autosomal DNA, even famously challenging others to, show their autosomal DNA, they would say things like, "Let me see your autosomal," right? Because the TEOTW twins have done that, in this video I'm going to focus on Gedalia's autosomal DNA. Of course, if one were to insist instead on a patrilineal definition of Israelite, autosomal DNA would be irrelevant. But, and by the way, with that in mind, for those who are curious about Gedalia's paternal haplogroup, it's a subclade of T, which is itself pretty interesting. He has a Facebook forum dedicated to that haplogroup, which I'll also link to in the video description. But as I said, the TEOTW twins have shifted their emphasis to autosomal DNA. So let's briefly get into Gedalia's autosomal DNA, right? Let's first look at the results that he got from GEDmatch. And I want to ask if anyone who's familiar with TEOTW Ministries remembers the days when they, when the twins over at TEOTW Ministries and others around them used to appeal to GEDmatch. Remember that was really popular in recent years, but unfortunately they seem to have quietly moved away from GEDmatch, and they seem to not want to discuss it anymore. But whatever the case, on your screen is Gedalia's results in the Gedrosia Ancient Eurasia K6 calculator. Now, in my opinion, this is a bit more serious than just, tinkering around with Oracle results, which is what others were doing when they were appealing to GEDmatch. See, this is GEDmatch proper, right? This is not something from Oracle. And this particular calculator listed Gedalia's admixture as being 36% Natufian, which is to say that as per the samples used by this particular calculator, 36% of Gedalia's DNA was more like the Natufian samples they used than any of the other samples that the calculator used. And I wanted to share this because that's a lot higher than a lot of the people who try to wave off Latinos in toto might get on this calculator, right? And aside from that, we can look at what he got on Eran el-Hayek's platform, which is the Ancient DNA Origins platform. That platform, which was promoted and celebrated by a bunch of folks recently, has listed Gedalia as 28% Israelite in the general categories. And I want to make clear and emphasize that this is his score in the general categories. That's an important distinction, as some will throw around a number that they got on el-Hayek's platform. They'll say, I got 15%. But they'll do that without clarifying that they likely got that against an individual sample. It's not their percentage for Israelite in the general categories. That's an important distinction. Some of the folks who promoted el-Hayek's platform got very low scores, or even nothing at all, for Israelite in the general categories. Yet this gentleman, Gedalia from How Music, got 28%. And in the Naphtali tribal kit on al-Hayek's platform, when Gedalia was compared with other modern populations in the Middle East, he scored above what was listed, the other samples, right? And I feel compelled to point out that this wouldn't happen for a lot of the folks who wave off Latinos in their entirety. So again, these figures are significant, at least relative to some of the discussions on Israelite DNA that have been going around the internet. And with that in mind, let me say that the reason why I wanted to briefly show Gedalia's results is because I think they serve as a cautionary tale in a couple of different ways. First, for certain folks who want to go the autosomal route, they're not being honest and consistent about what sort of results they're getting on the very platforms they've promoted, whether it be GEDmatch or Eran el-Hayek's ancient DNA origins. Some of the very people they reject, whether they be mainstream Jews or light-skinned Latinos, are doing significantly better on those platforms than they themselves did. And honestly, Gedalia might be an example of how there might be more overlap between certain Latinos and certain Sephardic Jews than some realize or are willing to accept. Second, if one wants to criticize the One West Tribes chart, I'll probably agree with you on a lot of the criticism. But there's a difference between saying the chart lumps too many people together on the one hand and disdainfully waving off anyone who appeared on the part of the chart you don't like on the other. But with that, I'll close this video here. It's a very brief video. I just wanted to submit the example of Gedalia into the public conversation. I'm not telling you, just to be clear, I'm not telling you to conclude that he is an Israelite, but I would ask that you at least be clear and consistent with your methodology for attempting to assess those sorts of questions. At the very least, I personally am interested in seeing what else he brings out, whether about his own DNA or DNA in general, and I'm also looking forward to see whether his documentary idea comes to fruition. Simply put, think of this short video as a mere conversation starter. And as there's surely more to be said, feel free to share any comments, questions, criticisms, or objections. Share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And God bless.